These are some notes. I realized for my Tuesday-Thursday group that I forgot to get these sets of notes to them. So for them, it might actually be, or the remote kids, it might actually be easier to type these because you're actually going to do a lot of writing here. Because what we're going to do in this chapter is we're going to, we have a lot of different statements and definitions that we talked about with geometry. And this chapter is going to be about breaking down the structure of those statements and those sentences and what they look like. And we are going to have a few different vocab words, some new terms that we're going to look at today. All right. So this part right here goes in the blank space there at the top. There should be a blank section at the top of the notes, and that's where you're going to write down the stuff in this box here. So right underneath where it says goal, that's where you're going to write this down. And the type of statements that we're going to focus on is called a conditional statement. That's the first new word. And you might want to write down that a conditional statement is also, I also tend to call it an if-then statement. I call it an if-then statement because the sentence structure starts with if and then a certain phrase, then and then another phrase. And all the sentences follow that same structure, that same outline. And we have, it's called a conditional statement because what it involves is I tell you a certain condition that I know to be true, and you are able to guarantee me a specific conclusion about whatever statement I gave you. So the structure that we're going to follow is if I tell you something about a geometric term or about someone, then the conclusion that we can make that you can guarantee me has to be true. So we have two different parts of this sentence. We have a hypothesis, which is the condition that I am telling you, and the conclusion that you can make based on that information. So the part that I'm telling you is true is the condition. That's why it's called a conditional statement. And then what you can guarantee me has to be true is the conclusion that you can make. So let's take some examples here. The shorthand for the hypothesis and conclusion is that the hypothesis is going to come after the if in the sentence, and the conclusion is going to come after the then in the sentence. That's how you find the hypothesis and conclusion. If you have your driver's license, then you are 16 years or older. So let's break down this sentence and let's talk about hypothesis and conclusion and this conditional statement. This is an if-then statement because I'm saying if the information I tell you, so I have this person, and the information I'm telling you about them, the condition, is that this person has a driver's license. That's the thing that I'm telling you about the person. Then the conclusion that you can guarantee me back about this person, because I know they have a driver's license, the thing you can guarantee me is, oh, they must be 16 or older. Because you have to be at least 16 to have a driver's license. So the condition that I am telling you about the person is that they have the driver's license. So this is my hypothesis. I'm going to put the hypothesis in a box like this in red, and I'm going to underline the conclusion here in blue. That's the structure that I'm going to have. So the hypothesis is you have your driver's license, and then the conclusion, remember the conclusion is the part that comes after the then. You are 16 years or older. So when we write out what the hypothesis and conclusion are, there they are. Hypothesis is you have your driver's license. Conclusion, therefore, we can say that the person is 16 years or older. So let's try this with another example. Let's actually go into geometry land here. I tell you that there's an angle I'm thinking of. Okay, I'm thinking of some angle. And I'm wondering if you know whether that angle is acute, right, or obtuse. Well, you don't right now. Because all I've told you is that it's an angle. But now I tell you that the angle measures 67 degrees. Now, is it acute, right, or obtuse? It's acute because it's less than 90. So as soon as I tell you 67 degrees, you can guarantee me back acute. Because that's what an acute angle is something that measures less than 90. So that's how the structure of this sentence works. If, here's the thing I'm telling you, angle measuring 67 degrees, so here's my hypothesis, then the conclusion that you're telling me back is that the angle's acute. That's what you were able to tell me had to be true. Hypothesis, conclusion. So let's take some sentences and turn them into conditional statements. Let's turn them into if-then sentences. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to figure out what's the hypothesis, what's the conclusion. And we're going to use that to get our if-then statement. So there are two different ways we can do this. We can look for, if that if-then structure is kind of there already, then we can just transfer it over. But the other way is that we can think about it in that concept. What's the condition that I am telling you about the person or the thing? And then what's the thing that you can guarantee me back? So let's take this sentence, all teenagers want a cell phone. What is the first thing that I'm telling you about the person? Well, the first thing that I'm telling you about the person is that they're a teenager. I'm talking about teenagers. I'm talking about teenagers, and then the thing that you are telling me, the thing that you can guarantee me based on this sentence, is that they want a cell phone. That's the conclusion. If I tell you there's a teenager, you can tell me that they want a cell phone. But you don't get your cell phones right now because you can't have them out while we're doing notes. So here's my hypothesis, here's my conclusion. And so the overall structure of this sentence should basically say, if teenagers then want a cell phone. Let's clean that up and make that sentence look a little nicer. So if you are a teenager, then you want a cell phone. Hypothesis, conclusion. Again, we're looking for where's the hypothesis, where's the conclusion? Three points are collinear if there is a line containing them. Put the phone away. So we are looking for the hypothesis. What's the part that comes after the if? Conclusion, what's the part that comes after the then? So we've got 3 points are collinear. If! Oh, if! That's a big clue. Because that if-then statement, well, if starts off the sentence, so that means that this part is probably, the part that comes after the if, should probably be my hypothesis. And then the other part of the sentence should probably be my conclusion. We actually talked about this word collinear. Collinear means same line. Points being on the same line. So if there is a line containing them. Well, now we're starting our sentence with if there is a line containing, well, them. We haven't said what them is yet. So what is the them in this sentence referring to? In English, this is called the antecedent. In other words, what is the pronoun referring back to? Because we want to actually put the idea here first. So the thing that the them is referring to is the 3 points. The line is containing these 3 points. So that's how we're going to structure our sentence. If there is a line containing, or if a line contains 3 points, that's what the them is referring back to, then they are collinear. Hypothesis, conclusion. So make sure we get that written down. Don't forget, I'm checking these notes for points tomorrow. So as long as we're writing down and keeping track through, that should be easy points for you. And of course, following along tomorrow as well. So I'll give you just a moment to finish writing down. Moving on. Last week we talked about always, sometimes, and never statements, where we had statements that were always true, that were sometimes true, sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't, or they worked most of the time except for a couple times where they don't. And then we have things where they're never true. If we're just talking about true, false, though, true is our always case. So if something is true, then it always works every single time. Every single time I tell you the condition or the hypothesis, you can guarantee me the conclusion. So true is our always works every time. If I can find any time where this doesn't work, where the statement does not work, where you can't guarantee me that conclusion, then the statement is false. I had a reading and English teacher in middle school who would say this as, it is either all true or it's false. It either works every single time, or I can find times, or maybe only one single time, where this doesn't work. As soon as I have a time where it doesn't work, then it's false. And that time where it doesn't work is called a counterexample. It's an example that counters the statement. So I want you to think of, I have a statement here, and I want you to give a counterexample. So remember, this part should go in the blanks next to the true and false, so write that down. And then give me a counterexample to this statement. If a number is odd, then it is divisible by 3. And just for fun, since we're coming up with divisible by 3, write down 3 different counterexamples to this. We only need 1. But I want you to think of a couple different times where this doesn't work. Let me help you out. Let me think if it were true, what would I be saying? I would be saying if a number is odd. Okay, so now I'm telling you a number, and I am telling you that that number is an odd number. I'm thinking of a number, and it's odd. And the conclusion, what you can guarantee me, what you would be saying you can guarantee me, is that the number I'm thinking of in my head has to also be divisible by 3. That's what the statement is saying. I'm thinking of an odd number, and so now you're telling me it's got to be divisible by 3. So if you can think of a number that I could be thinking of in my head that doesn't work for that statement, then it's false. So I heard 1 as a counterexample. Give me another. One doesn't work because it's an odd number. It's an odd number that I could be thinking of. But if I divide it by 3, it doesn't work. 7 also doesn't work. It's an odd number, but if I divide it by 3, nope. Anyone got one bigger than 50? I'll give you one. 635. 635. If I take 635 and divide it by 3, nope. Not going to be divisible by 3. Negative 11 also doesn't work. Also not divisible by 3. And these are all counterexamples that show that this statement has to be false. You only need one counterexample. Okay, one more word to talk about, and that is negating a statement. Because we're about to negate these statements, so I want to talk about what that means. Negating the statement basically means taking the opposite of the statement. So most of the time, that's going to involve taking the phrase and putting a not in it. Taking the phrase and putting the not in it. And so if we have the Cubs will go to the World Series, the negation will be the Cubs will not go to the World Series. Which is always a sad day. Now, I want you to think more, a lot of times I'll say opposite, but when I say opposite, remember that comes from negation. You are negating the statement. That's what I'm talking about, opposite in terms of. So the opposite of John is tall isn't John is short. The opposite of John is tall is John is not tall. So the opposite of tall is not tall. The opposite of up is not up. The opposite of a team winning is a team not winning. It's not a team losing, because then we're eliminating the possibility of a tie or the game getting delayed or canceled or some other circumstance. We want to cover all our bases of not winning. So that is the negation of winning is not winning. The reason we're talking about that is because we're going to talk about the negation of these statements. So let's take a look at that. And as an example, we're going to use the sentence of, if it is summer, then there is no school. We'll talk about whether these statements are true or not later, but for now we're just talking about rearranging the sentence. So first off, there's the hypothesis, there's the conclusion. So we're taking the example of this sentence of, if it is summer, then there is no school. So this is, so this should be at the top of the next page. So the first type of statement that we are talking about is the converse. For the converse, we are basically taking the if-then sentence we have. So we have this if and then structure. And we are taking the hypothesis and conclusion and we are switching them. So we're taking our hypothesis and conclusion and we're switching them around. So if I've got, if it is summer, then there is no school. So I'm going to take these two and I'm going to switch them around. And instead it's going to say, if there is no school, then it is summer. So the hypothesis got moved out to the end here, and the conclusion got moved out over here to the beginning. They just got switched around. That is the converse. That's going to be the most common thing that we're going to do to a statement. The converse is going to be the one that's most common. And so that involves just switching around the hypothesis and conclusion. Then we have the inverse. For the inverse, this time we're going to keep the statements where they are, but we are just going to negate them. So I've got this same example of if it is summer, then there is no school. So instead of switching anything around, I'm going to leave the sentence how it is. Everything's going to stay where it is, but it's going to get negated. So I've got if it is summer. What's our negation of it is summer? Negation of it is summer would be it is not summer. And then instead of there is no school, our negation would be there is school. So this time the hypothesis stays where it is, the conclusion stays where it is, but they get negated. So we take the opposite of the statement. So the converse, we switched them around, but we kept the statements how they were. The inverse, we kept the statements where they were, but we negated them. If we do both, switch them and negate them, that is called the contrapositive. Switch and negate. That is doing both. So if it is summer, then there is no school. So this is going to get moved to the end. This is going to get moved to the beginning, and we're going to take the opposite of each of them. So this is going to read if, negate it, there is school, then it is not summer. So converse, switch. Inverse, negate. Contrapositive, we're going to switch and negate. And we'll do some more examples of that tomorrow.